Otherwise, one more person. Okay. So as I said, I'm Alessandra. I'm here to talk to you today about options for studying abroad in Spanish-speaking Latin America. So we'll go over a few different things with regard to that. We'll talk about the application requirements and then the application process. We'll take a look at a year versus a semester of study abroad and what that might look for you, especially taking into consideration the academic calendars and some of the places you might be considering. I'll talk a bit about the Middlebury schools abroad in Spanish-speaking Latin America, as well as externally sponsored programs. So you may be considering one or both, and we'll compare some of the differences between those two. And then we'll talk about next steps and where to go from here if you want to continue and start an application. Finally, we'll have some returnees joining us toward the end who can tell you more about their experiences, where they were, how they made their decision, and any advice that they might have for you. And as I mentioned, feel free to pop questions into the chat at any time, but there'll also be plenty of time for questions at the end. All right, so to apply to study abroad, there are a few requirements that you have to meet. These are going to be the same at the beginning for both Middlebury Schools Abroad and externally sponsored programs. So you need to make sure that you have a B- average overall, that's a 267 overall. You also want to make sure that you have a B or 3.0 average in your major courses, as well as in your Spanish courses. And that is true whether you're applying to one of the Middlebury schools or if you're, applying to an externally sponsored program. Even if that externally sponsored program does not have a language requirement or doesn't have the same language requirement, Middlebury as an institution has this requirement for all Spanish-speaking programs abroad. You also need to make sure you have completed at least one 300 level Spanish course before you go. And you can be in the process of completing this when you submit your application, but it does need to be completed before you go abroad. Language school is really excellent preparation for this because it gives you a full year's worth of experience and instruction within 6 to 7 weeks during the summer. It's a great way to prepare to be studying and living under the language pledge, which you'll be doing if you're at a Middlebury school abroad. Or if you started studying Spanish maybe just this year and you're a brand new beginner and you need to sort of catch up to the point where you'll be able to take a 300 level before you go, language schools is a great way to do that. If you're interested in participating in the Spanish language school, you do need to be mindful of the calendars, especially if you're looking to go abroad in the Southern Hemisphere, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But the two calendars do overlap, so you want to be careful with your timing. There is some need-based financial aid for the schools, for the language schools. It's a first come, first serve basis based on need. So if you're interested and think you might want to throw your hat in the ring for financial aid consideration, we recommend applying early. The application should open in early November, so you can keep an eye on the language school website for that. A few other things that we'll ask you to do. We strongly encourage a language course enrollment the semester prior to going abroad. So even if you have completed that 300 level requirement, it's a really good idea to take a class right before you go so that the language is as fresh in your mind as possible. You'll need to get a recommendation or an approval from your major advisor or advisors if you're going to be a double major. And you're also going to need to ask for a language assessment form from one of your most recent Spanish professors. There is a standard study abroad application form that you would do for Middlebury, again, whether you're doing a Middlebury program or going on an externally sponsored program. And this is going to be due on February 1st for all of you who are thinking about going abroad next year. So even if you're not planning to go until spring 2022, you still need to submit your application by February 1st of this upcoming spring. Okay, so big question. How long should you go abroad? For a whole year, for an academic semester, maybe even during a summer or a J term? There's a lot to consider when making this decision. Again, one of the things to keep in mind is the academic calendars, especially in the Southern Hemisphere. So Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, their calendar tends to be the opposite of ours. And so their academic year begins in March and runs through until December. So their summer break is during the months of January and February. So what that means is our fall semester is their second semester of the academic year. It's their spring. So it starts, or I'm sorry, it's their first semester of their academic year in the spring. So it's going to start late February and run until mid-July. And then our spring semester, or sorry, their spring, our fall semester starts mid-July and runs through until the December holidays. So basically, either way, one of your summers is going to be cut in half because you'll be in country studying. So you want to keep that in mind when you're thinking about other plans you might have to do summer internships, work, maybe attend the language schools or do some other academic preparation. So just keep that in mind. If you're going for the whole academic year, it's going to be middle of July through middle of the following July. Students, especially Febs, sometimes will also do a calendar year in the Southern Hemisphere because it lines up with their academic year. So in that case, you would start again mid to late February and go through until middle of December. If you're considering a program in the Northern Hemisphere, however, so Mexico, Costa Rica, Cuba, their academic calendars are probably going to align more closely with ours. They won't be exactly the same, but they'll be a lot closer than it will be in the Southern Hemisphere. If you can go abroad for a whole year, we do strongly encourage it, and there are a lot of reasons why. There are a lot of benefits to being abroad for the entire year. One of the big ones is progress with your language proficiency. Students often notice that that second semester that they're abroad, their language progress not only doubles, but it actually improves exponentially. So, you know, and the same thing goes with their cultural immersion and feeling settled in. You do a lot of groundwork that first semester to get to know where you are, get comfortable operating in Spanish, make friends, get to know your host family. And then it's that second semester where you can really enjoy all of the efforts that you put in during the first semester to get to know the place and make it feel like a second home. But that being said, a lot of students can't go abroad for the full year, and that is completely understandable. And there's still a ton of benefits for going for a semester as well. When deciding how long to go and when to go, one of the most important things to do is to talk with one of your major advisors, especially if you have a very particular academic plan. Often students in the STEM fields, pre-health or pre-med students have a lot of academic requirements that they need to complete. And so you want to be very careful when planning to make sure that the semester you elect to go is going to work with your overall academic plan. Keep in mind if there are particular courses that you need to fulfill at Middlebury that may only be offered during a particular semester. And then know how many transfer credits you can apply to your major from abroad. So every major is going to have a different limit and different requirements or parameters. So that's another important thing to talk with your advisor about as you're making your plans. And this is just a quote from a mid alum who did choose to go for the whole year. And as I said, it just allowed them, they found it really allowed them time to settle in, strengthen their relationships with the friends and others that they were meeting there, and really reach the point of fluency with their Spanish. So if you can swing it, there are a lot of benefits to going for the entire year. Some students also ask if they can go to 2 different locations during an academic year, and you can. Depending on where you want to go, we might want to talk about that first so that you know what is required in terms of visa applications and things like that. Some combinations may be easier than others. So if you're thinking about trying to go to 2 different places, just let us know and we can work with you on that as well. So cost is another really important thing to think about. In general, if you're going to Central or South America, you can expect to spend less overall for food and housing while you're there, but you will likely be spending more on travel, maybe eating out and doing some of those extra things than you do typically while you're at Middlebury. For the Middlebury Schools Abroad, the semester and the year tuition for the 21-22 academic year are posted there. You can also find these numbers on our dates and fees page for each of our programs. You will only be billed for tuition and for the study abroad fee, which all Middlebury students are charged for each semester that they're abroad. Next year, it'll be $1,850. Beyond that, everything is considered to be an out-of-pocket expense, and that's just because you pay for it as you go throughout the semester rather than paying for everything all at once at the beginning. So housing, you'll be paying on a monthly basis. You'll be buying your bus pass and your books and other things like that as you need, rather than doing it all at the start of the semester. If you're a student who receives any type of financial aid, we strongly recommend that you talk with Student Financial Services about what you can expect in terms of your financial aid package, how that might differ or look different than it does during a normal semester on campus while you're abroad, and other things to expect. So it's never too early to start talking with them as well about how to budget for your time abroad. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the Middlebury schools in Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay. There are some similarities between all three, but differences obviously as well. So regardless of where you go, the academic program is going to be largely based on direct enrollment. So you're going to choose a host university that you would like to attend, and most of your classes will be taken there. Usually it's either 3 or 4 courses for the semester. Everybody at these schools also takes a half-credit writing and culture course. This is a requirement. It's run by the Middlebury program, so we hire instructors and you take it with the other students in the program. This will be the only class where you're only with other Middlebury program students. Everything else, like I said, is direct enrollment. So you're with majority local students while you're doing that. Many students do opt to take an internship for credit. If you do that, that will replace one of your university courses. And you can also choose to do an independent research project while you're there for credit. If that is something you'd like to do, it's best to let me know early so that I can connect you with the director and you can start making plans before you go. Housing is in homestays across the board. So that's a pretty set thing there. We'll have a housing questionnaire that you'll fill out as a part of your pre-departure requirements, so you can really specify your living preferences, anything that's important for us to know. Maybe there's a medical detail that you want us to be aware of, or dietary preferences. So you can really let us know what is going to work best for you in terms of living situation. And then our staff abroad will work to place you with a family that it meets that profile as closely as possible. And we do have staff in all of these locations. So we have a director and assistant director at our site in Buenos Aires, and an assistant director in Montevideo in Uruguay. The director for Argentina and Uruguay is one person, so he will travel back and forth between the 2 sites, but you'll always have the assistant director there in the city with you. In Chile, because we have so many different locations, we have 3 full-time staff members who are primarily based in Valparaiso. So Valpo and then Viña del Mar, which is right next door, are the 2 locations where we have our full-time staff. Our director also will split his time between Valpo and Santiago. In the other locations, we have resident coordinators. So these are Middlebury hired people who will be there as your on-the-ground support person in case you need anything, and they'll check in with you from time to time throughout the semester. Our director does also visit these locations as well, and he's always available to connect via phone or Zoom. But if you are more comfortable with the idea of being in a location where there are full-time staff, you want to keep that in mind, especially if you're thinking about going to Chile. And the program sizes do vary. We have about 50 to 60 undergraduates from Middlebury and other colleges and universities in the US with us every semester. So, we could have anywhere from 2 to 5 students in one particular site, upwards to 15, 20, maybe even 25 students in a particular site. So it just depends on the semester. I won't go through all of these with you now, but as you can see, there are a lot of options, especially in Chile. So we have a number of different cities and host universities that you can choose from. I am more than happy to chat with you about which are going to be the best fit for you. And there are ways to sort of whittle this down and kind of figure out what the best site will be. So just know that I'm here to help kind of guide you through all of this. In Argentina, we only have our site in Buenos Aires, but we do have 3 different universities that you can choose from. So again, if you have questions about which would be the best fit for you, please let me know. And the same holds true for Montevideo. So you have 3 different choices for universities. All of these universities have different strengths. And so depending on the type of classes you want to take, as well as the academic environment you'd like to be in, that's going to determine which will be the best option. One of the big things to think about, and often a good place to start, is to think about whether you'd like to go to a public university or a private university while you're in South America. And there are some pretty distinctive differences between the two that might help you make that decision. So much like the US, public universities, by and large, not exclusively, but are often much larger than their private counterparts in South America. In Argentina and Uruguay, they are free to citizens. So, and in Chile, they're less expensive, just like they are here in the US. And so what that means is you have a much more socioeconomically diverse student body. You have students from all different walks of life and at all different stages of life as well. So it's not uncommon to be in a class with mid-career professionals or retirees who are just taking the class out of interest. So it creates a very different dynamic than what we're often used to at small liberal arts colleges here in the US. They have been considered sort of the gold standard in higher education until recently, just because private universities have sort of risen to that challenge and met their standards. But public universities in South America have a very strong reputation for being really good academically. That being said, because they charge either lower tuition, as in the case of Chile, or no tuition to citizens in Argentina and Uruguay, they have fewer financial resources at their disposal. And you'll notice that particularly in the infrastructure that's available at these public universities. They'll have buildings that are perfectly solid and sound, but they're pretty minimalistic in terms of amenities. They're not going to have a lot of advanced or updated technology. There won't be a lot of extra student services available. And this is where I think a lot of students end up making their decision is they also don't tend to have a lot of bandwidth or financial resources to provide extracurricular or co-curricular activities for students. So there aren't a lot of university-sponsored clubs and activities at these universities. The student bodies at these universities do tend to be very socially active and politically active. So there's tons of student groups that you can join, but because they're student run, they're a little bit more informal. You might have to do a little more legwork at first to kind of figure out who's meeting where and when, but just know that that's a major difference that you'll see at these public schools. Because the student bodies student strikes or strikes in general are also more of a possibility at public universities. We see this especially in Chile over the last few years, but we've seen it in Argentina too. We do have contingency plans and ways to support you if your university does go on strike, but if that's not something that you want to have in the potential mix for your semester abroad, that's another thing to think about too as you're making your choice. So just quickly, on the flip side, we have the private schools. Again, not always, but often they tend to be smaller in size. Some of them are actually Middlebury sized, or maybe even only a little bit larger than Middlebury. They do charge a tuition to everyone, so they tend to be more socioeconomically homogenous. However, they also tend to host more international students by comparison. So you have more diversity in that sense, a larger international student population. Some of them are modeled off of the US model of higher ed, so they won't be exactly the same as Middlebury, but they'll be more familiar, the way the classes are structured, class size, some of the other services and amenities that are available will be more similar to what we have here in the US. So again, higher tuition means more financial resources. So you do have more infrastructure at your disposal at these schools, more university sponsored events and activities and things like that. They're less likely to experience strikes, but they're certainly not immune. Again, especially not in Chile, where striking has just become a part of the student experience there in general. But in Argentina and Uruguay, they tend to be much more quiet. So that's something that you can keep in mind as well. And then finally, a final note about the Middlebury programs, we do have a number of specialized tracks that we offer at some of our different sites. Again, I won't go through all of them here, but lots of different things for all sorts of different interests. There is more information about this on our website as well. If you choose to do the track, you do sort of commit to being focused or more thematic in your course selection and in any internship or independent research you might do as a part of the track. Somebody in the registration form asked a great question though. They asked if they could mix and match courses from different tracks. You can do that. Not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, you know, if you are a neuroscience student and you'd really like to take one neuroscience course while in Montevideo, but you don't want to solely do that, you can absolutely mix and match and maybe do 1 or 2 courses in that area and then 1 or 2 in another. Likewise, if doing an internship in public health or human rights really interests you, but you also want to be taking other types of courses, you can do that too. So the courses and internships that are designated to these tracks are not reserved only for these tracks. You can access them otherwise. All right, so I told you a lot about the Middlebury programs, but that is not the only option. There are lots of really great externally sponsored programs in Central and South America as well. So we have some examples there. We've had students go to Bolivia, Costa Rica, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Peru. So lots of different options. My colleague Stacy is the advisor for these externally sponsored programs. So if you want to learn more, she's really the best person to speak with. You can also go to our website and take a look at some of the different programs that students have done in the past. When thinking about externally sponsored programs, there is a really wide range of type of program that you can choose from. So we like to think of it as a spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum, you have university-based programs. So these are similar to the Middlebury programs in that they tend to be focused around academic courses. They're often focused on direct enrollment at a local university and doing formal study, research, and that type of thing. On the other end of the spectrum are field-based programs. So these are programs like the ones that the School for International Training or SIT offers, or Round River, if any of you have heard of those programs, where you're literally out in the field doing a lot of experiential learning. So doing field research, you might be traveling to a few different locations while you're abroad. These programs often are thematic as well, so you might be focusing on environmental sustainability while you're out in the field for this semester. And then there are programs that have a mix of both. So, it's going to be up to you to decide what sort of combination or format is going to be best for you. One thing I want to mention too is that it's good to think about whether or not language immersion is an important part of the experience for you. And there's no right or wrong. You know, Middlebury does focus on language immersion in our programs, but you might have other goals for your time abroad, and that is completely fine. Just know that some of these programs, as I mentioned before, may not have as high of a Spanish requirement or may not have any type of Spanish requirement at all. So if you're hoping to have language proficiency or fluency be one of the outcomes of your time abroad, you want to keep that in mind too, and kind of pay attention to the level of focus that other programs place on the linguistic piece of the experience. A few other things to know about costs when it comes to externally sponsored programs. Again, you will be charged the Middlebury Study Abroad fee, as all Middlebury students are when they go abroad. Your financial aid will work a little bit differently though. So your federal aid, which tends to be federal grants or loans, will be applicable to these programs as long as you go through our application process and are approved by Middlebury. However, your Middlebury-based aid, so these would be your grants or scholarships or other thing that the college has provided, are not applicable. So you want to keep that in mind too when you're budgeting. If you are concerned about that, or if you really want to do an externally sponsored program, but may not be able to take all of your aid with you, you can also look into scholarships. There are study abroad specific scholarships out there. They tend to be small or medium in size, so in most cases they won't cover the entire cost of a program, but they might cover your flight or a chunk of your housing for the semester. There's a part of our webpage that lists a few different options for places to get started. Another page that I really like is Diversity Abroad. They have a list of different scholarships that you can check out as well. Okay, so lots of things to consider. And again, I'm here, I am happy to chat and help you start to figure out what might be the best option for you. But, you know, thinking about what type of subjects you want to study, do you need to get major or minor credit while you're abroad? Thinking about how much support you want is really important too, because again, with all of the different programs out there and the different structures, some are going to have a lot of built-in support through the program, and others are going to have you be more independent on a day-to-day basis. So you can really think about too what's going to be best for you in terms of having a successful semester. Living situation as well. Again, all of the Middlebury programs are homestays. Maybe that's really not appealing to you. So if that's the case, maybe you want to think about a program that would offer a different option. We talked about, you know, your goals, both academically and personally. And then in thinking about the type of environment you want to be in is really important too. So that goes for city and living environment, as well as academic or university environment too. And then the most important thing, especially because there are so many options, you want to pick what's going to be best for you, regardless of maybe what others have said in the past, or maybe what your friends are thinking about doing. Kind of go with your gut on this one and think about what's going to help you have the best experience possible. I also wanted to just mention briefly that thinking about your identity and when you're picking a study abroad program can also be really important. This is a really big topic. There's a lot here that we can talk about, and so one slide really doesn't do it justice. We could have a whole separate session on diversity and identity and study abroad, but I wanted to use this at least just as a place to start. We have a section of our website. You can get to it by going to go/SA/diversity that has resources for students who identify with any number of different communities on campus or just in the general public. So feel free to check that out. There are things that you can think about when choosing a program, as well as things to consider while you're abroad, links to articles and resources, and hopefully other things that will be helpful. All right, so Next steps, doing research ahead of time is really helpful. Talking with your language professors, a lot of them are familiar with some of these programs. Some of them have even visited like some of the Middlebury schools abroad, for example, so they can give you their insight and their impressions. Again, academic advisors are a really important piece of this process and making sure that everything is going to align well with your overall academic plan. You can come and meet with me anytime. All of my appointments are on Zoom this semester. We have an online appointment scheduler that you can go to and pick a time that works best for you. And then talking with returnees is probably one of the best ways to really get a sense of what a program is like, advice for preparing, and figuring out what is going to be best for you. As I mentioned, February 1st is your big deadline for your applications. Take a look at your passport now and take a look at the expiration date. Your passport has to be good for at least 6 months beyond your last day abroad. And so even if that's not for a while yet, you may want to think about just going ahead and renewing now if you're getting close to the expiration date, so you don't have to worry about it later on. Meeting with other offices on campus during the planning stage can be really helpful too. Again, if you're a pre-health or a pre-law student, for example, and you have questions about timing things around taking exams to get into graduate schools, the CCI is a great resource for that. SFS is crucial. And then likewise, you can meet with the Parton Center if you have any health-related questions. And if you're an international student here at Mid, it's a really good idea to talk with ISSS just to make sure that everything is going to be set with your student visa when you're ready to come back to the US after being abroad. And then I just want to make a quick plug for a bunch of the other events that we have going on this semester. There are going to be a lot of different opportunities to get to know, especially the Middlebury programs abroad. If you're interested in externally sponsored programs, there is a very good chance that those external programs are going to be having similar events. So I would look at their websites or reach out to an advisor or a program rep there to find out if there's anything that you can join. But for example, the school in Spain has an Open Doors Day coming up next week. We'll have our directors talking about internship opportunities abroad, and then academic tracks in Argentina and Uruguay next month. And then there are going to be extra info sessions with our directors from the different schools abroad during these different times. All of this is on our go/essay/events page as well. But I would highly recommend just popping in. You don't have to stay for the whole time, but if you have questions or want to know more, they're the people to go to, especially around academics, the tracks, things like that. And then I don't know if you all have seen this, if you're in a Spanish class this semester, perhaps you have, but the Spanish-speaking schools abroad have gotten together and created this really fantastic website, schoolsabroadinspanish.midcreate.net. You do need to use a password, which is escuelas, to get on, but they have tons of cultural events happening this semester. They have weekly conversation groups, movie chats, the information about all of the different Quieres Estudiar en events are all there. So go check that out, sign up for some events. You'll probably see me at a few of them. I'm super excited about them. But it's just a really great way to have fun with Spanish, practice using your Spanish in a different setting, and also get to know some of the people that you might see abroad in the future. All right, so that's enough from me. I would love to introduce our returnees. And I know I saw Spencer and Sean and Elijah pop in. So maybe Sean, do you want to go first and introduce yourself? Maybe tell us where you were, what your major is, and yeah, maybe we'll start with that major and where you were abroad.
Fantastic. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Ho-Jun Ri. I am a senior. I use he, his pronouns, and I studied abroad in Buenos Aires, Argentina in the fall of 2019, as you see on the screen. And at Middlebury, I'm a double major in economics and Spanish.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Spencer, do you want to go next?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Spencer. I'm a senior this year. I use he, him pronouns. And my major's International Global Studies, Latin America. And I studied abroad in Montevideo for the year, although, of course, in the spring I did have to come home along with everyone else who's studying abroad. Is there anything I missed in that?
Nope, that was perfect. Thank
Great.
you.
Nice to meet everybody.
And Elijah.
So hello everyone, I'm Elijah Willig. I'm a sociology major. He, him, his pronouns, masculine gender agreement for Romance languages. And I studied abroad in Montevideo, Uruguay for the semester.
Thank you. And then, let's see, I'm still letting some people in, so hopefully we'll see Kat soon as well. But I would love to get started. There's like 3 big questions I always like to start with returnees. And feel free to skip a question if you'd like, but I would love to hear from each of you why you think a student should choose your study abroad location, why perhaps they should not choose your location, maybe if there is something that maybe a certain they may not be looking for, or might be looking for that wouldn't make your location a great fit. And then, is there something that you're really glad that you had considered when making your choice, or is there something that in hindsight you wish you had considered? And we'll go in opposite order. So Elijah, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I think Montevideo would be a good location for someone who has an interest in actually taking a language pledge seriously. In Uruguay, not a lot of people know English, so you don't really have the option if you did want to speak English with people. It's a relatively small program usually of students who are coming to really try to integrate with the local culture. So I think definitely if you want to see your Spanish improve, Montevideo would be a good location. I also think Montevideo is a good location for people who want to be in a city but don't want to be in a large metropolis. It's a nice city that's easy to get around with the bus system, and a lot of stuff is super walkable as well. And then also it's a small enough country where it's super easy to get to the neighboring countries as well. So if you ever did want to go to like metropolis like Buenos Aires, right, you could easily take a ferry ride there, right, about 4 hours. Or Brazil's right above, so maybe when you have some free time or after exams, right, you can go up and explore Brazil a bit. So it's definitely people who are interested in seeing their Spanish improve a lot, integrating with the local culture, and would prefer a city but not a metropolis, I would say would be definitely reasons to go to Montevideo.
Great, thanks. Yeah, Spencer, you were in Montevideo too, so.
Cool. Yeah, I can hop right on. Definitely the reasons why that Elijah just said were huge reasons for why I decided to go there to Montevideo. This idea, Vermont, we're really out here in rural Middlebury, and so hopping right into a huge city was just not what I was looking for. And Montevideo has both of those things, these beautiful parks, ability to get out of the side of the city quite easily, but also, all of the exciting events that happen. I think having something that you can walk out of your house to, and like there was a tango festival one weekend, and there's always something to take advantage of. So definitely mirroring that, what Elijah just said. I can speak a little bit to something that I didn't find in my experience abroad there, which is a lot of immigration from all over the world, and the fact that Montevideo is not a particularly international city. And so there's not a ton of tourists, particularly sort of in the academic times when we're there. And so, as Elijah said, you're not going to get a ton of English, but that also means that like when we were looking for Chinese food, when we were looking for bubble tea, when we were looking for spicy food, we just didn't really have those because it's not such a big cultural influence on the city itself. So thinking, pretty critically about some of the things that you enjoy doing in a city, and if those come from distinct cultures, particularly in Asia, but also sort of around the world, you might not find that there, whereas in a bigger city where there's more immigration and just more possibilities, you would find that much more easily. And that's not to say that there aren't those groups, those restaurants, those everything, but sort of the lack of diversity in food was something that I definitely noticed. Although if you like eating meat or if you like pasta, then Montevideo will be a beautiful place for you. And you know, I think like a lot of you, it's a tough decision because we have some really great schools in Chile, Argentina, Uruguay. They'll all be an excellent program. Middlebury does this really, really well. So I think the thing that I wish I'd considered when I was going through this process is not worrying so much about making the wrong decision in general, but worrying more about making the right decision for me. Because every single location will give you something different, and you have to think, you know, a little bit more deeper than you would otherwise. What are my goals for studying abroad? What do I want to get out of it? And what's the place that can help me out with that? So it's not really so much choosing the perfect location, but choosing the location that's going to match up to the goals that you have.
Great, thank you so much. And then from the other side of the river, Sean, I'd love to hear about Buenos Aires.
Yeah, of course. Can you guys see me and hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, I had some issues with the Wi-Fi. So yeah, I went to Buenos Aires, and I will kind of flip on Spencer and Elijah's argument that if you're really into metropolis, like really big cities, this is the place to go. So for me, you know, being in Middlebury, I've definitely kind of thought about, what my life would be like if I lived in a large city. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I chose Buenos Aires. It is a really, really big city with some pretty decent public transportation. So I was able to get to everywhere using the metro and the bus and just by walking as well. So that made traveling very accessible for me. And, you know, regarding travels, Argentina has a lot of places to offer. So Patagonia, Iguazu Fall, and a lot of other tourist attractions. And like Elijah said, Uruguay is just a boat ride away. So that's always an option. And I actually visited Elijah and Spencer during my time there. And for me, regarding academics, I chose Argentina because of Universidad de Ditela. So it was one of the schools offered in Argentina, and it was more of like a private school. So I knew that when I was applying to my programs at abroad, I knew I wanted to be in a small school with a smaller classroom size because that's where I thrived. And I guess I had to kind of quote unquote sacrifice the authentic experience by not going to the national university. But being at that school, I felt a bit more supported and a bit more heard. And my, I guess, fear of speaking in class definitely went down a little bit because I was in a smaller setting. And regarding the social life, I think, because that's another important aspect of choosing an abroad program. There are a lot of neighborhoods that are hip and cool, I guess, and there's a lot more options like restaurants and other recreational places that you can visit during your free time. One could say it was gentrified, but still, they have a lot of tourists coming into the country, so their recreational options are actually pretty diverse. And also the government of Buenos Aires actually supports this program called Study Buenos Aires. So that's the program where they actually bring in study abroad students who are in Argentina, and they actually give them free, like no charge, free tours, free activities, and even opportunities like teaching English to like elementary school kids. And that's kind of what I did. I went to an actual public school to teach English to the kids there, and it was really nice to use my Spanish to offer English classes to the students. I had a lot of fun doing that. Now, going to the second question on why one may not choose this study abroad program is that if you're intimidated with large cities, I think this might not be the choice. And if you still want to go to Argentina, Cordoba is a really great option. I visited Cordoba, and it feels like Buenos Aires, but a lot smaller, and still have the same like options of recreation options, and the schools I heard is like great. So Cordoba might be another place to consider if you really want to come to Argentina. And like Spencer touched upon this a bit, Argentina has a large immigration population, so it is a very diverse country, but diversity doesn't necessarily mean it is an inclusive environment. So when I was there, I kind of saw the country as a predominantly white country, and that affected how I navigate the space. So I guess keeping that in mind, I think, Alessandra, you were touching upon identity while abroad, and that is definitely a piece that I had to really focus on when I was in Argentina. And that is kind of going to the third point, is that I wish I knew more about how to navigate those spaces, not academically, because we're all mid students, we kind of know what we are designed to do in classrooms, I guess. But yeah, I just didn't have any info on navigating the space per se. So I definitely struggled with that a little bit. And just an overall advice to all students who are thinking about abroad is, you want to choose the program or decide that you're going abroad because you actually want to go, not because it's like a cool thing to do that all my other friends are doing. Because I had plenty of friends who went abroad with me and years before me who have said, oh, like it was a fun time, but I don't know if that was the best thing that I did for myself. So really just consider what your like priorities are and what your values are, and hopefully that is in line with your study abroad option. So yeah.
Great. Great advice from all three of you. Thank you. All right, so we'll kind of open it up now. I'd love to invite anyone who would like to pop a question in the chat, and I'll sort of moderate and go through any questions that you might have for Spencer, Elijah, and Sean. But likewise too, you know, I don't know if any of you have things that you feel like are really important for students to know about your study abroad location or the process of choosing, the application process. There's some ideas on the slide there, but there may be others that you have in mind as well.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention really quickly, and obviously very happy to answer anyone's questions, is the personal attention that's paid to the students in Montevideo by the Middlebury program. You know, with Elijah, there were 5 of us. The next semester there were 8, and Sylvia, who is our coordinator, I simply cannot like say enough incredible things about her. She connected me with the Fulbright office there and got me an internship there, which of course, you know, didn't work, but because of COVID. And she has connections with theater. She has, you know, like just having a person there who is looking after your life was such a huge difference for me, because I always knew that I had, you know, someone to fall back on. And the thing that makes the Middlebury program so great is that support. And I think, you know, a lot of the other programs in other countries, it's a little bit more independent. You still have the people there who are looking out there for you. But yeah, I just can't say enough about how great Sylvia is as a coordinator in Uruguay. And if you're looking for a program that has sort of that safety net built right in, Montevideo is a particularly good option.
I'm not seeing any questions yet. I'm trying to think. Oh, there's one question. Thanks, Emma. So great question. How or where did you make most of your friends in your study abroad location?
I can tackle that. So I'll be real, it's hard making friends while abroad. There's that cultural barrier, but also you're speaking a different language, which made it even extra hard. But I'd say the friends that I made actually came from my interests. So what I mean by that is, when I went to Argentina, the Universidad de Ditela had this system where the students actually decide on a major, and they actually stick with their students for their entirety of the 4 years as they're studying there. So by the time I went there, it was really hard to, I guess, penetrate that social circle. And it was actually really hard to talk to them during class, but still, you know, I made small talk, but didn't really get to the level of friends per se. But they also, Ditela offered a lot of extracurricular activities like club sports, like soccer, running, that are all open to the current students at the school, as well as the international students who are studying abroad in the school. So I didn't necessarily sign up for those, but a lot of my friends did, and they actually had a blast, not only hanging out during the club times, but also like comparing kind of their lives outside of the university time. So I have some positive anecdotes from them. But for me, I met most of my friends through really diving into my interests. So I had a I knew that there was a large Korean immigrant population in Argentina. So I asked my assistant director to see if she knew anything about it. And she said that the university that hosted Middlebury's abroad program had a Korean department. And through that department, I met a Argentinian professor who was teaching Korean, and through them met Argentinian students who are interested in the Korean culture, and I was interested in Argentinian culture, so voila, like it worked really nicely. So I think making friends, my advice is wherever you go, really pursue your interest and try to find that common ground with each other, because wherever you are in the world, as long as you have the same interest, you're communicating the same language. So I'd say that is my advice on that, but I will also recognize that it was very, very hard to make friends when I was abroad.
Yeah, to quickly bounce off Sean, classes are definitely one way, and I had success in a linguistics class because there were students there who were interested in learning languages, and so they were like interested in helping me out with my mistakes in Spanish, which was fun. So if you're able to find a department that happens to be relevant to like cultural studies and finding people who are, you know, interested in international students. But then I also, you know, joined a choir when I was abroad through the university, and that was a huge takeoff, particularly meeting people of all different ages, you know, and not just having friends that were, you know, 20, 21. So definitely finding the thing that you do at Middlebury that makes you happy, finding a way to do it abroad is a great way to keep yourself sane and also make some really great friends.
I'll just say, because Sean and Spencer have like really covered it really well, just that I think one thing that surprised me, probably what shouldn't have been that surprising, is that culture is like humor is really cultural, right? It's really culture based. Right. So even if I had a good understanding of Spanish, it took me a while before I could actually like say things and people would like consider it funny, you know, which I think can be really frustrating in the beginning, you know, because humor is such a great way to like break tension and break the ice and really get to know each other. But I think just giving yourself time, and the more you learn about where you are, the easier it'll be to tap into that. So.
Fantastic, thank you. Our next question is from Madeline. Were you able to travel to other places in South America while you were abroad?
Yeah, I can quickly say that through the Middlebury program, which was awesome, we were able to go to Cordoba in Argentina together, like Rio Platense, the two groups. And that was great. And then I also had the chance to travel with my family to Brazil for 2 weeks. We went to Rio and Sao Paulo. So I would say, regardless of what program you're on, definitely take the advantage to visit other places while you're there. I mean, you know, obviously we'll see what happens with COVID, but we'll see. And make those times special. You know, it's definitely possible to do with class schedules, with you know, the holidays that you're given before or after. Both locations are excellent jumping off points to go elsewhere.
To share a little bit of my experience, I was in Argentina. So like I said, I visited Elijah and Spencer to Uruguay because somehow like my schedule really aligned nicely with a break. So I was able to go. And that was a very simple process. You didn't even take a plane. I just took a boat, which was a lot of fun. And on my own, I also traveled to the Iguazu Falls, beautiful place. If you're going to Argentina, I highly recommend it. And that also happened because my classes got canceled on Friday. So I ended up having like a 4-day weekend. So I was like, well, why not? So, and to share a little bit about me, I don't travel a lot. I'm kind of the person that's scared of traveling alone, but I traveled alone to Iguazu Falls, and I felt challenged, but it was also really cool that I, you know, did that for the first time. So, I would say going to the touristy areas, like that is a generally, I guess, easy experience, to like easy setup, I'd say. And I have a lot of friends who also travel to, like Spencer said, like to Brazil, to Chile, you know, before things went sour, all that stuff. So I think it depends on this current situation, the political and the economic situation in the region. But traveling wise, it was fairly simple, and that's coming from someone who is scared of traveling.
Thank you so much for sharing. And then Sophie asks, what is the role of the homestay family in your study abroad experience?
Can I show a photo of my cute little darling? I wonder if I can do. Can I do share screen, Alessandra?
I think so. Here, I can, let me think.
Yeah.
If I stop mine.
When I was abroad, I was in a host family with, a mother, father, and a 4-year-old boy, and it was so nice. Obviously, everyone has a different experience, and I think it's really important for people to, recognize and realize what they're looking for. You guys can see that, yeah?
Oh, great.
Francisco,
Super lindo.
and we just had such a good time together. So you can see if I can click. Yeah, this is my whole host family. And what was really fun about that actually is that I could teach him words in Spanish because he was learning Spanish, obviously. He was learning to speak. And so I finally felt in my abroad experience that I knew something. So if you like kids, if you like, smaller kids, definitely having a host family with children is a great idea. It worked really well for me because whenever the conversation lagged or I didn't really understand what was going on or whatever, like the kid would break something, and so then there was always something to talk about and there was always energy in the house. But maybe, Elijah can speak to his different experience because for everyone it's different and everyone is looking for different things.
Yeah, so I would, again, it is different with every family, right? And you would get some sort of form, if I'm remembering correctly, right, of asking you to, talk about what you're looking for in your housing experience. And I would definitely fill that out as honestly as you possibly can, just so that you get the best match. But my family was really nice. It worked out really well. It was a mother and her 2 adult children, and then the grandmother living in this apartment. And they really, I think the most important thing is that they really just respected my independence to do what I wanted. And I think that's the thing I valued the most, right? I mean, I had my own room and I had access to this little bathroom. They allowed me to, right, set up my schedule and do what I wanted. And when it came to like family events, they were always happy to include me. But if I had plans or if I was feeling in a particularly introverted mood, right, they were always happy to just leave me by myself, which ended up really working well for me and making my experience, my living experience while in Montevideo really amazing. So I definitely could not praise them enough.
Cool. I'll add another layer to that. So for me, I had to change my host family halfway through my program, and that happens. We're all people. We're all living together, so we have different styles of living. For me, the biggest challenge was I wanted a host family that gave me a lot of opportunities to speak the language and in a more colloquial, more casual way outside of the classroom. And unfortunately, my host mother, and I only live with my host mother, she was a working mother, so she had a shift from 9 to 5. So she always came back to the house very late. So I actually ate alone all the time. And that just was not working with me. And I wanted a bit more of a, interaction with the family member. So I told the program saying, hey, would it be all right if we change the program, the host family? And, I had to wait a couple of weeks, but after the pay period was over with the rent, I was able to move to a different family. And in that case, I was with a lovely family. Their names are Susie and Fuzi Sponsi. And it was just really great because I was able to have really deep conversations about like politics and economy of Argentina and just like how it's like being a foreign student in a different country. Like Spencer said, he appreciated having conversation with like the little kids. And for me, I just appreciated the fact that I could have that quote unquote adult conversations with people who have been in the country for a long time. So like your needs are very different. And I would say as a part of the advice when you're filling out your like abroad homestay sheet, I would say really be specific. You can actually indicate whether you want to have like little kids in the house, like if you want little kids, how old do you want them to be? really specify what you need, because you're not losing anything, you're only gaining from that survey. So I would say really be clear about what you want from those homestay experience, because I will say the first one was not too ideal, but the second one definitely gave me a nice end to my time there.
Thank you so much. Those were such great insights into homestays, and it is such a big part of the program. So it is something that's really important to take time on the questionnaire, like all three of them suggested, and make sure that you're filling it out so that we can find a good match for you. Another question from Emma. So let's see, did you consider yourself to be fluent in Spanish before you went abroad? And if not, how was that, or what was that like?
So I would definitely say I did not consider myself to be fluent when I went abroad, right? I studied Spanish in high school, but that really meant nothing at the end of the day. And then 2 years at Middlebury, and I went to the Spanish language schools here as well. So I felt I had a decent command of the language, but I definitely didn't feel fluent, right? I felt my language was neutral, though upon being there, I found out it has a bit of a Portuguese, a Brazilian tilt, because I spent some time studying Portuguese as well, which led to a lot of people thinking I was Brazilian. But I definitely didn't think of myself as fluent, but being there, I was definitely able to communicate what I needed, get around. Definitely when you're starting classes, I was picking up, maybe a 60 to 70%. But right by the time you get to the mid-semester, you really start to see the improvement in your understanding, in your communication. You start adopting local accent, you start using slang words, right? I don't think most people go feeling super fluent in the language, but it definitely comes pretty rapidly as long as you're continuously interacting whenever you can.
Yeah, I totally agree with Elijah. I think that people come in with different levels of fluency, and that's totally fine and good, and I think that if you feel comfortable having conversations with people, understanding things, and if Middlebury says you're good, then certainly in Montevideo you're going to be able to survive, which is what we want, right? And I have an interesting perspective on this because I left, after the fall semester, and then I came back. So I had 2 or 3 months without much contact with Spanish, and then I came back, having been fluent, having been ready, knowing things. And what I found those, 2 weeks that I was there is that I still encountered difficulties. I understood things better. I knew where I was going so much better. But when you're speaking the whole day long in a second language, you're going to make mistakes, and it's going to be difficult. So definitely in all of these programs, you're going to improve incredibly, and that's sort of the goal of the language pledge and immersion and studying abroad, which is awesome. But I wouldn't feel too nervous about not being totally fluent before going, because you will improve and you're going to be confused no matter what, because it's both a new linguistic environment and a new cultural environment. So there's a lot of those hurdles to do. The better your Spanish is coming in, the easier that'll be. But yeah, it's a process, and every person is going to go through that process, starting at a different place and ending at a different place, but everyone's going to improve just really drastically.
Yeah, I mean, like Elijah said, I took Spanish back in high school, when I was a junior, came to Middlebury, continued to take it, and ended up going to the Spanish language school actually with Elijah together. But even at the end, I still had that linguistic insecurity that comes with learning a new language. But I'd say what changed me after, taking Spanish and going to Argentina was this attitude that it's okay to make errors, and actually making errors is the best way, and not feeling self-conscious about that. Because when I went there, I talked to people and made a lot of grammar mistakes just because I accidentally used the imperfect instead of the preterite. People are not going to be like, I didn't understand you. You get your point across, and that's what matters. And I think it's more the matter of how you improve during your time there, not about what level you start at when you get there. Because either way, you're going to converse with people and communicate no problem, in my opinion, as long as, you know, you are not afraid of making those mistakes and are excited to learn from those mistakes. I think that's the attitude. And I think another point of concern is like how I'm going to navigate the school that is all taught and all the homework is done in English, I mean, in Spanish, right? I'd say from my perspective, the workload from Argentina was not like as hard as the workload at Middlebury regarding the content. I think the biggest challenge was the language barrier. And fortunately, we had a lot of language support from the program itself that I was able to set up meetings with like local students to like talk over grammars and talk over like study skills. And also like the assistant director would like, I could always ask the assistant director to sit down together and look over like an essay saying, hey, like, do you see any like errors or are any sentences confusing? So you also have that support when you're there. You know, at the end of the day, we're all going abroad to really experience a new culture and also improve our language. So I'd say just have that attitude going in there and don't worry too much, because at the end of the day, you'll be able to communicate.
Thank you. And that's really, really great advice. And let's see, I want to be respectful of people's time, especially as I said, it's a beautiful Friday, so I don't want to take up all of your daylight. But are there any other questions? You all have really fantastic questions. So I want to give you a chance to put any more in the chat. And if we don't have any others, I also wonder if Spencer and Elijah and Sean have maybe any final thoughts or advice for students thinking about going to South America next year.
Yeah, what I'll say is that I can put my email in the chat, and also you can send it out to the email list, Alessandra, because the fact is I will talk anyone's ear off about my experience abroad, my very lengthy decision making of where I was going to stay abroad, both semesters. And please email me with any more questions you have, or if you just want to talk, because yeah, and I think that's probably true about Elijah and Sean as well.
Thank you.
I guess like some practical advice, you know, until you get on that plane and go off to, you know, Uruguay or Chile or Argentina, is that when you're choosing your like Spanish classes, I guess, try to take one that you think will have a lot of conversations in it, because I think the biggest challenge that I saw in a lot of my abroad classmates were like the fear of speaking, either in class or in the streets or like in the house. So I think more practice will make you feel a bit more comfortable, and you can get that from not only classes, but also just setting up office hours with your professors or anything like that, or just grabbing someone like one of us, like Spencer, Elijah, or myself, to talk in Spanish and talk about what Argentina is like. I'd say just get more practice in, and hopefully that'll relieve a bit of the stress on speaking a different language.
And I guess I'll just end it by saying that while you're abroad, right, you're doing this whole new thing, you're living in a new country, new culture. Try new things, but don't put yourself too much out of your comfort zone, whether that be in classes or experiences, right? Because you're still trying to filter something in a language that's not your first language, without all of the cultural knowledge, right? So it can be harder than you're expecting at times. So definitely take a step back when you need to, and just say, you know what, maybe I don't need to like do this right now, right? Just take care of yourself more than anything.
That is great advice. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone being here, and thank you, Elijah and Sean and Spencer, for your fantastic insights and advice.